This is my first Substack Live, so I might be getting the cobwebs out a little bit, but I'm happy to be here and trying this new technology as a way to reach people and to help them with their writing. I have been teaching writing for a long time. Actually, let me just start with a little bit of a bio about me for those who don't know me. I've been writing and editing for 35 years, and I started out as an editor at a major national magazine, and then became an adventure, travel, and politics writer for major magazines, and did that for 15 years plus. And then after sort of a dark night of the soul uh, that I experienced for a few years, I came out of it really uh, desiring to teach and to reinvent myself as a teacher and a book editor. And so, I've been doing this kind of teaching and editing and helping people to tell their stories for a long time, and it's something that just really I'm passionate about. And I know that I've been changed and healed by writing. Some of you might know that I published a memoir in uh, 2023 called Into the Soul of the World, and it tells the story of how I became an adventure travel writer and some of my travels and adventures, but then how I was struggling the whole time with depression and post traumatic stress disorder and addiction, and then how I kind of found my way out of that and back to a thriving life, and so that book's called Into the Soul of the World, and Hachette published it in 2023. Um, I plan on doing these every week now, and I have two of them scheduled each week. One of them is going to be on Wednesdays at this time, and the other is it's going to be a guided prompt, and so we'll get to that in a second. The other Friday mornings, I believe it's at 9 o'clock Mountain Time, is just going to be open writing, and we'll just hop on and start to write. You know what? If there's an echo, I'm reading that. I'm going to take these earbuds off, and maybe that'll fix it. I've heard that before with these. Thanks for that feedback, Bentley. It'll fix it, but we'll try those another time. Um, so Friday mornings, we're going to do just open free writing. We'll hop on and support each other to make progress on whatever project we're working on. Um, but let's get to the prompt today, and I'm going to tell a little story about it first. In 1998, I was I was a contributing editor for George magazine, the politics and culture magazine that John F. Kennedy Jr. Founded, and they brought me on to write adventure stories, and to one of my first assignments, they sent me to Russia, and I went inside Star City and wrote about the Russian space program and their relationship with the United States at that time. But one of my first assignments was to tell the story of Captain Craig Button. And Craig Button, and some of you might have read my Substack post about Captain Button, but he was 32 years old and was a pilot at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona. And one day, he and his squadron were flying their A-10 planes, and he peeled off from the squadron over Arizona, and he drove 800 miles, um, flew 800 miles toward Colorado. And then once he arrived in Colorado, he took this strange circuitous path. He went over Telluride. He went over the Black Canyon of the Gunnison, um, and eventually over the Maroon Bells in Aspen and over toward Vail, and then toward this mountain that was called the Mount of the Holy Cross. And he had he circled it and circled around it a time or two, and then he slammed his plane into this mountain, and he died, and this plane was wrecked into 100 pieces, and it was a mystery. And so when I first joined George, John F. Kennedy Jr., I was back visiting him, and he called me into his office to talk about this assignment. And it escaped me for a long time why he was so interested in this. And obviously now, he was a pilot and he lost his own life in a plane crash. But long story short, I traveled all over the U.S. trying to figure out what had happened to Captain Button. And eventually, I went to California, Texas, Arizona, New York, talked to all the people in his life, and eventually a picture began to emerge that he'd grown up in a strict religious family. You might even call it a cult, and then he became a part of the army or the Air Force, and which had a contrasting um, contrasting values in some ways. And I began to see that his life, he sort of outgrew his life, and he didn't know what to do with it. He didn't know how to make change in a way, and so I think that's what happened to him. And I don't know that for sure, but I do know that I've experienced times like this when change has come slowly, and sometimes we don't even recognize that we're outgrowing our previous lives. And then something happens, we catch ourselves in the mirror. Um, we are on a drive and suddenly we realize that, that's my dog, Tommy, the mailman. We realize that something's just not working anymore, and we've got to make change. And so I want to get to the prompt here today. And so this is going to be the focus every week. Is I'm going to offer a prompt and maybe tell a little bit of story about how I came up with it. But that's sort of the background of this prompt, and knowing that in my own life I've had these situations come up, multiple times. So I'm going to read the prompt now, and I'll pause after the prompt for any questions. And then, I send you out to do the work on this prompt. And, then maybe next week when I come back on, we could talk a little bit about how that prompt went. Um, so I want you to think of a time when change was coming for you, slowly, quietly, maybe for years. Maybe you sensed it but tried to push it away. Maybe you didn't see it until life made it impossible to ignore. Right about that period before this shift, when you could still pretend nothing needed to change. Where were you living? What did your days look like? What signs were already there, whispering that something needed to end or begin? Then describe the moment when you finally had to move. What pushed you? What broke you open? What did it feel like to step across the invisible threshold into a new chapter? You don't have to make sense of it all. Just stay close to the sensory details, the light, the weather, the sounds, and let the deeper truth surface as you write. So, with these prompts, I always remind people to take what works for you and leave the rest. If some aspect of this is feeding you and you want to just take it on a tangent, or if the entire prompt works for you. But I think the essence of it is to try to write about a time when change came for you. It's not that we willed to change necessarily, but that life was changing you, and then you needed to do something, and maybe you needed to act and step into some new way of being. Um, and so that's the prompt for today. And I'm this wasn't a very long Substack live, and as I mentioned at the beginning, this is my first one, so I'm trying to figure out how to go forward. If there's any questions in here about the prompt, feel free to write something in before you get started. It's just fun to be here and to be trying this technology. So, uh, yeah, well, hope you all have fun with this prompt, and I'll post it both on the notes, and I'll also post it in a post and an email to you. Any questions before we go? I think this kind of writing is really life changing, and um, thanks for that, Bentley. And I teach these sections called Writing the Soul, and the work I do is a combination of memoir teaching, and I do teach the craft of memoir, but I also kind of see this writing the soul, these prompts, as accessing places and stories within us that are kind of a pre-memoir, um, way of thinking and writing and getting into our stories. So, and even if you're not writing a memoir, you're welcome. This is a way to keep unraveling and getting closer to the parts of us that maybe know more about ourselves and our lives than our conscious ego brains, do. Um, so I think that maybe we'll pause here. Any other questions about the prompt? I'll repeat the prompt again before I go. But the essence of it is to think of a time when change was coming for you, slowly, quietly, maybe for years. Maybe you sensed it and tried to push it away. Maybe you didn't see it until life made it impossible to ignore. Write about that period before the shift, when you could still pretend nothing needed to change. Where were you living? What did your days look like? What signs were already there, whispering that something needed to end or begin? Then describe the moment when you finally had to move. What pushed you? What broke you open? What did it feel like to step across the invisible threshold into a new chapter? You don't have to make sense of it all. Just stay close to the sensory details, the light, the weather, the sounds, and let the deeper truth surface as you write. So it's been a joy to be here today. It's fun to see we had 30 people here, and I was surprised. I kind of figured I would be doing this a solo today, this first time. I didn't publicize it much, but I'm really happy you're here. I hope you'll join me every Wednesday at noon Mountain Time, 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, and we will do a prompt together and tell a story, and I'll keep exploring this technology and would love to try to figure out how to be more interactive with you all. So awesome, and I'll look for the prompt in the notes here shortly, and sending you lots of love, and hope you keep connecting with your soul. All right, I'll talk to you next time.